welcome to Jurassic And welcome to Jurassic Room, you guys. So let's check all this stuff out. I have to swallow that real quick. Now we'll move on with the first thing on the list. The exclusive first look at the movie monster from Entertainment Weekly, King Kong. Picture will be right here. I had to say, this is impressive. He looks almost human in a way. You would expect to almost see him in a Planet of the Apes movie. But this is awesome. He's just what we want to see in King Kong, or I want to see. He looks so much like the 1933 King Kong. It's amazing. This is what I want to see in King Kong. So let's read this from Entertainment Weekly. It's on like King Kong, the gargantuan ape returns in Kong Skull Island, which arrives in theaters March 10th and stars Tom Hiddleston, Brie Larson, Samuel L. Jackson, and John Goodman. And while fans have been eager to catch a glimpse of the reimagined Kong, he hasn't been too eager to be seen. After all, just look at the welcome he gives to explorers in the 1970s set film. Led by Hiddleston as a British Special Forces vet and Larson as a war photographer who unwittingly stumble into his home turf. Here, director Jordan Vogt Roberts, Kings of Summer, unpacks that momentous scene as well as the look of the imposing figure, addressing his artistic vision, similarities, and differences with previous versions, conveying emotion through eyes and facial expressions, playing with scale and the ultimate reveal, and much more. The beast certainly roars again in this upcoming monster movie reboot, so all hail the new king of the jungle. Alright. Okay, Entertainment Weekly, what was your artistic vision with this beast going into the film? And what was the process like of bringing him to life? Jordan Vogt Roberts. With Kong, there's obviously so many different versions of him in the past, and ours needed to feel unique to our film. I had a mandate that I wanted a kid to be able to doodle him on the back of a piece of homework, and for his shapes to be simple and hopefully iconic enough that like a third grader could draw that shape and you would know that what it is. A big part of our Kong was I wanted to make something that gave the impression that he was a lonely god. He was a morose figure lumbering around this island. We sort of went back to the 1933 version in the sense that he's a bipedal creature that walks in an upright position, as opposed to the anthropomorphic, anatomically correct silverback gorilla that walks on all fours. Our Kong was intended to say, like, this isn't just a big gorilla or a big monkey, this is something that is its own species. It has its own set of rules, so we can do what we want and really want to pay homage to what came before, and yet do something completely different. There's subtle nods to the 1933 film. The 1933 film was black and white, so it's really easy to assume that the fur on the monkey is black. But there's actually a lot of forums and things that you read, and there's some real poster artwork that Kong's fur skews more brownish, so he actually pushed his fur in more of a brown as opposed to the traditional black. It really was trying to create this feeling so that when these humans look at him, they hopefully have a visceral response saying to themselves, that's a god. I'm looking at a god. You can expand on the loneliness about him, how you made him this isolated figure through his appearance. Kong's always been a little bit tragic. You can't tell exactly from the still, but the way that he walks on the island, the way that he goes from place to place. I wanted to communicate something about his headspace and about the way that in certain ways he's the protector of this island, and then in other ways he's killing time. The way he lumbers, the way he drags himself from place to place, there's an exhaustion to him. There's obviously a huge power to him, but there's a sadness contained within him, or his animation. The way that he walks and his facial capture fused with his very energetic young Kong at the same time. You mentioned the color of the fur, and this Kong is one of the biggest to appear on screen. Can you speak to the similarities and differences beyond those in terms of the look of your Kong compared to previous versions? If anything, our Kong is meant to be a throwback to the 33 version. I don't think there's much similarity at all between our version and Peter Jackson's Kong. That version is very much scaled up silverback gorilla, and ours is something that is slightly more exaggerated. A big mandate for us was how do we make this feel like a classic movie monster? Kong was a movie monster, so we worked really hard to take some of the elements of the 33 version. Some of those exaggerated features, some of those cartoonish and iconic qualities, and then make them our own. Or make them their own. We created something to do some degree served as a throwback to the inspiration that started all of this. But then, also, had it be a fully unique and different creature that I would think is fully contained and identifiable as a 2017 version of King Kong. I think there are very modern elements to him, yet hopefully he feels very timeless at the same time. Okay. How did you convey emotion through Kong's facial expressions and eyes in particular? The eyes are hugely important, not just with the creature, but with the human. The eyes are obviously the window to the soul. When you watch any actor half the time, you're watching their eyes as opposed to anything else. So that was incredibly important, and also, we're playing a tricky game with Kong, where you have a tragic hero, and you have to slowly pull the rug out in terms of who this person is. The other thing with our Kong is, much like the 33 version, right away he is not necessarily seen as a protector. He's got a job on this island, and at first he might be perceived as a negative or villainous force. And then you need those eyes to guide the audience and take them on a journey where you slowly pull the rug out and develop empathy for this being, for the plight and the day-to-day struggle of what it is to be this thing. We actually have extreme close-ups in this movie of Kong and his eyes to sort of plant the audience in his headspace. Well, one second, guys. I'm going to continue to blow my nose real quick. Okay. Speaking of, what's going on in this first look image? Is that people perceiving him to not be this protector like you were just saying? That sequence comes from a point in the movie where you're not quite sure who Kong is, what his purpose is. How should people be perceiving him? Through the folly of man, where our initial instinct is to attack anything that is not known quantity. Both sides jump the gun. Kong and the humans, and it kicks off a relatively messy engagement. At first, of course, you're going to perceive something like that as a terrible threat and a monster. The physicality of him alone. The huge part of the movie was designing him and creating the creature so that when you did see him, it sort of short-circuited your brain and was divisive to people, where certain people immediately say, that's a threat. Certain people immediately say that's a god. Certain people immediately say that's a savior. Visually and instantly, what happens when you see this thing towering over you, and what is your sort of emotional and intellectual response? With this Kong being one of the biggest, how did you play with the scale and reveal of his impressive size? Well, the reveal you can wait for in the film itself. But you'll see I shot this on anamorphic lenses, which a lot of people said, you're crazy, you're taking away more space to show how big he is. It seemed like a bigger challenge to communicate scale in that way. We're also fundamentally not playing the same game that Gareth Edwards or Godzilla did, and most monster movies do, which I'm sort of sick of. The notion that a monster movie needs to wait an hour or 40 minutes until the creature shows up. Kong traditionally does not show up in these movies until very, very late. And the monster traditionally does not show up until very, very late in a monster movie. So a lot of these movies tend to have this structure that's a bit of a slow burn. Something about this movie made me want to reject that and play a very, very different game. So I wanted to take quick. So apparently, we're going to see a lot more of Kong. And it looks like he was kind of taking a hit at Gareth Edwards' Godzilla, because he only had 12 minutes of Godzilla in the whole movie. He's only in there until like an hour later. Also, what was it? Apparently the fight between Kong and the humans is going to happen very early in the movie, from what I can tell, from what I'm reading. Okay, let's continue. It was honestly a great and interesting challenge trying to find scale cues for something that big. How do you frame him in the sun? How do you frame him in mountains? How do you find low enough angles that communicate the scale next to these people without just shooting into a blank sky? It was important that you understood the dichotomy between the scale of him and the majesty of him, and yet the horror and fear associated with something that big. That fine line between looking up and saying... Hold on one second, I gotta sneeze. Sorry, guys. The horror and fear associated with something that big. That fine line between looking up and saying, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, and might be looking at a god, and also I'm absolutely terrified right now. I may have peed my pants, he said differently, and I think that thing's going to kill me. What is that threshold and that fine line? So finding ways to shoot him and the island and all the creatures in a way where it's slightly more reflective in the scale makes you hopefully think everything in between those two ideas. Kong has remained a huge presence in pop culture. Why do you think this is a story that continues to be told and continues to resonate? And why is something that you personally wanted to pursue? Kong is a very tragic and relatable figure. Like Kong just goes to the idea of being misunderstood, which everyone can relate to, and B, that humans have a fascination with apes and where we came from and things that we don't understand. The reason that I was particularly interested in taking on the story, is not only those elements of Kong and the fact that he is film history, but in particular in this instance, in our time period, which is 1973, I was really interested in exploring the idea of the need for myths, why we need myths, why myths exist in our life. Right now, in our modern society, we are destroying myths through all of our technology. We have access to everything with our cell phones, which is amazing, and it's also taken away some of the wonder of the world. I wanted to tell a movie about what happens when people are reconfronted with myths and put back into the food chain, and how that makes them react and behave. And I think that Kong is a myth that we have been telling now. So if you're going to re-engage with that myth, I think it's important on a larger scale, but also on a franchise scale, that you make it a new myth. Every other Kong movie, for the most part, has essentially been, yeah, there's been Son of Kong and King Kong Lives, and things like that, but the main sort of Kong stories throughout time have been remakes of the same Beauty and the Beast story. And this movie is not the Beauty and the Beast story. It's sort of fundamentally a new telling within some of the mythos of this world and some of the imagery and ideas within this world. In the same way, I think that we, as people, need new stories throughout time. If you're going to engage with Kong and need to do the same thing, you can't keep telling the same story. As someone who grew up loving early creature features and movie monsters and things like that, one of the things that attracted me to it, beyond telling it a story, that's about people and how a place makes them react to otherworldly and around godlike creatures. It's what happens when they're presented with things that should not exist. What does that do to people? How does it make them behave? Who breaks? Who becomes stronger because of it? Who rallies together? What individual journeys do each people go on? Is there anything else about the look of Kong that we didn't talk about that you want to mention, either about your process or the final results? It was very, very long design process. Before we had a script, before we had production designer or a visual effects team, or much of everyone, we immediately dove into the look of Kong, which we knew was going to take a long, long time to finalize. I like the idea of you get the sense that he's simultaneously very young, yet very old. Like I said, there is a lumbering quality to him, and I wanted to find that threshold of having him feel aspirational. Like, aw man, wouldn't it be great to be him? And also really tap into the underlying plight and sadness that his life contains. So maybe, from what I'm getting, he's an ancient species of ape that, and he's the last one of his kind, that's what I'm getting so far. From a design perspective, you go in one direction and end up with the Hulk, and you go in another direction, you end up with the Planet of the Apes. And then Peter obviously did such a good job with his version, so you're left with a very narrow target of how you create something that pays homage to what came before it with the 1933 film. Which was important to me because I love that design. I love the fact that he feels like a movie monster and not just a big gorilla. So how do you make something that feels real, yet also is a throwback to movie monsters, and then takes on that very larger-than-life, godlike quality, and then be able to pull back the layers from it, and peel the onion to throughout the film, and find out more and more and more about him and his backstory, and hopefully kind of lock you into this emotional state and invest you with him. It was a really great process and fun process, but it was a very long process, finding ways to show the daily life and struggle that he goes through. I think there's a lot in the movie that hopefully almost feels a bit Planet Earth at times, in terms of this is the struggle that this guy goes through. This is what his daily life is, and some of it's great and exciting, and some of it's bad and hard, and this is what he is and who he is. And that's it. So, wow, 16 minutes. So, I wanted to cover everything. Let me see how far the... Oh, darn it. Okay, I gotta put this on charge. Hold on a second. Okay, so I'm gonna get on with this one. This is the second one I wanted to talk about. Godzilla and King Kong Writers Room Planned. This is awesome. I'll be uploading the picture for this right here. Legendary Pictures has brought on Krampus writers Michael Daughtry and Zach Shields to pen the script for the studio's highly anticipated sequel, Godzilla 2. The news comes just a few months after the sequel lost its director, Gareth Edwards, and the studio still hasn't announced a replacement filmmaker quite yet. This report also reveals that the studio is considering bringing out even more writers for this burgeoning franchise that will also include Godzilla vs. King Kong. Yeah, that sucks that they got rid of Gareth Edwards, or he dropped out. That really sucks. Variety sources claim that Legendary Pictures is considering putting together a writer's room for the studio's entire Godzilla and King Kong franchise. It has already been confirmed that the upcoming Kong Skull Island will lead into the highly anticipated Godzilla vs. King Kong. Legendary had originally set up Kong Skull Island at Universal, but sent the rights back to Warner Bros. To help set up this franchise that brings Godzilla and King Kong together. The site speculates that while Michael Daughtry and Zach Shields are only currently signed on to write Godzilla 2, it's possible they could help set up the Godzilla and King Kong writers' room, although that hasn't been confirmed. As of now, the Godzilla sequel is set to release on March 22nd, 2019, with Godzilla vs. King Kong slated for release May 29th, 2020. The writers' room format has been used with the Transformers franchise, Universal Monsters Universe, and the G.I. Joe Hasbro franchise. And Universal movie monsters I cannot wait for. Original Godzilla writer Mac Borenstein had written the script for Godzilla 2, with the writer teasing last year that the sequel will be bigger and better than the original. No story details have surfaced quite yet, and it isn't clear if any stars from the original Godzilla will be back to replace their roles. The American Godzilla reboot cast included Bryan Cranston, he won't be back because he's dead, Aaron Taylor Johnson, and Elizabeth Olsen. I really doubt that they'll be back. Ken Watanabe, Sally Hawkins, Julia Binoche, David Statham, and Richard T. Jones. I want Sally Hawkins and Ken Watanabe to come back for Godzilla 2. And I'd love to see, I've got a video on this, on whether we can see Ken Watanabe's Dr. Serizawa in Kong Skull Island. I want to see Ken Watanabe come back. Let them fight. Legendary announced at Comic-Con 2014 that Godzilla 2 will feature Rodan, Mothra, and King Ghidorah. Little else has been confirmed about the story thus far, and we don't know if Michael Daughtry and Zach Shields will rewrite the previous script by Max Bornstein, or if they are starting over from scratch. Michael Daughtry wrote X2, X-Men United, and X-Men Returns before directing the cult classic Trick or Treat. Michael Daughtry teamed up with Zach Shields to write the script for Krampus, which he directed. Hopefully we'll learn more about Godzilla 2 soon. So let me get rid of that. And we got the final one. Let me blow my nose real quick and we'll finish this up. Okay, so this is for IMAX. And apparently, we got the deal that IMAX has signed a new pact with Warner Bros., which will send such high-profile films as Justice League, Wonder Woman, Blade Runner 2049, and the latest films from Christopher Nolan and Steven Spielberg. I wonder what he's directing next. I gotta check that out, see what it is. The deal further extends the pair's initial 2003 agreement that it includes up to 12 new films from the studio. The Lego Batman movie, Minecraft. They're making a Minecraft movie? Are you serious? Is it animated? I never really got into Minecraft, but I wonder how that'll turn out. I know there's a lot of people who like Minecraft. Kong Skull Island, a Godzilla sequel, a Tomb Raider reboot, and the first sequel to this fall's Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them are among the other chosen titles. So that is it, y'all. That is all the news we got so far on Kong Skull Island and a little bit of Godzilla 2. I hope y'all enjoyed this video. Expect more reactions tomorrow. Got a lot of stuff planned. I've got to do the Jurassic reading comic book. I've got to get back to work on that. But anyway, remember to like, comment, subscribe, guys. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more videos.